Hello, I'm Game Master Pope, and today we are discussing giants. Giants are incredibly simple and effective brute force efforts to remove a problem with just overwhelming muscle. So why are they boring? Now, in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, a giant generally has one of three actions. One, they can throw a rock at you. Now, I don't want to discount the fact that this rock is literally the size of a human man, and this will just be a terrifying sight to behold as this thing hurtles through the air and then just half buries itself in the ground around you. But that's it. The second option they have is to hit you with their main weapon. I'm going to be using frost giants in this example because me likey de Vikings. Once again, this axe is no slouch, 3d12 plus 6, very tasty. That's gonna fell a tree in one swing. I hope your armor's nice. And finally, their most interesting effect, multi-attack. They get to attack with the axe twice. I don't know what to say about this, it's the axe twice. Now, rules as written, you can't use multi-attack like extra attack and substitute those two axe attacks into grabs. You definitely should though, because only those three options are not very exciting. It is a huge amount of hit points with a very accessible AC. It throws a rock once or hits you twice with an axe. Now, if you do plan on running giants, specifically this frost giant example that I've got here, I do strongly recommend having a look at some outside books. There are a lot of third-party content for 5th edition that are all very interesting in their own unique ways. However, might I posit, DCC and 3rd edition D&D, they are interesting, and that for me is the most important thing. First up, DCC. DCC does a very interesting thing where giants don't roll a d20 to attack, but they actually roll a d24. Now, if you don't have one, this isn't important. This is just a very interesting aside, because it also uses a different crit system. Now, the crit system in DCC isn't you just simply double all damage. What actually happens is you roll on a crit table, and you see what secondary effect happens. In the case of a giant, it could be that they hit you so hard that you lose d6 inches of height as your spine compresses. Alternatively, the giant hits you with such force you become a ranged weapon attack on your ally, as it just hurtles you both through the air, possibly causing you to take damage a second time. These aren't double damage, therefore you die. These are fun and interesting things. So back on that d24 I mentioned, really this just gives it a +2 to hit, but the big thing is the fact that a giant will crit on any natural roll of 20 to 24. So that's 5 out of the 24 results will result in a crit. So for those of you keeping track, that's about a 1 in 5 chance of something interesting happening when you make the attack you were going to make anyway. 3rd edition now, and this one's going to get a little bit controversial because 3rd edition is very different to 5th edition in a lot of ways, but very similar in a lot of other ways. The core maths is not horribly dissimilar. The important thing is how in 3rd edition, the base attack bonus, which is effectively your proficiency bonus, worked somewhat differently, and this allowed you to get what 5th edition calls extra attacks. Now, these extra attacks can be used for grapples, trips, disarms. So unlike with DCC, which had a focus on crits, making the interesting play, the 3rd edition Frost Giant has the improved Overrun and improved Sunder feats. You don't require the feats to make these actions, however the feats do just make it easier. Firstly, improved Overrun. With Overrun, you simply just move through someone's space. And as you do so, you just kick them careening off to the side. That guy is now on the floor, unable to defend himself. He is prone. The rest of your lackeys will beat him up. The added bonus to this is that it forces mobility. You are now not pinned down to the spot you are. You simply just move over the fighter. And even more scary still is the fact that you are now base to base with the spellcaster, who has zero response to a lot of things that are going on now. Improved Sunder is one that's a little bit iffy. Not mechanically so, just in my heart. I have a little bit of an issue with this one, to be perfectly honest. I have tried it. My issue with Sunder is that it's kind of mean if you haven't set your players up for this kind of thing happening. What it does is you will take your very large great axe because you're a giant, bring it swinging down, and as the fighter brings up his sword to block it, you cut his greatsword in half. Just clean in half. It is no longer a greatsword, it is gone. Now, you can only sunder a weapon if the enchantment bonus of your weapon is equal to or greater than the enchantment level of their weapon. And by default, you do not have a magical Great Axe, you can give them a magical Great Axe, however, that's not the stat block. Though, definitely give them +1 axes. By the time you're fighting a Frost Giant, you should be having +1 gear anyway. Now, with those 2 actions, which you can't do in the same turn, to be perfectly fair, you have one person who's been knocked prone into a corner, and if they stand up, you can make an attack of opportunity against them, and hey, you can substitute the attack of opportunity for Sunder, so you could do it in the same round. Or you can just spend one of your multiple attacks, because a Frost Giant has a few attacks, to simply shred their sword in half. You can also break their shield, or damage some plot-related item. Now, what this means is that you are causing an effect that is more than just hit point damage. The fact that you are now prone and adjacent to a giant means that standing up, you're going to get hit. You don't want to get hit, so what do you do? Do you stay on the floor? Do you crawl away? Do you take a total defense action? What do you do? Choices. These make the character have to think about things, and I love it. If you take away their main weapon, again, on the one hand, you've got the player thinking, oh, I liked that. I've only got Goblin Scimitars left. In my opinion, you should have a secondary weapon just in general, especially if you're a martial. If you're a rogue or something, you've got 6 to 25 million daggers anyway, so it's not a huge bother. Wizards don't have weapons per se, but if you're a martial and all you have is this one sword, I have come to the opinion that you've kind of brought this on yourself. Have your greatsword wielding character. Love it. Do not change this. Simply add to it that he also has a longsword. It's only versatility. You should also have a ranged weapon, because that's just a smart option. Again, specifically when fighting giants, maybe the ranged weapon is better than a greatsword, as you can't get hit by them in melee with the range of a longbow. Now, another thing a giant can do is it can make 2 attempts at grappling you, or it can knock you prone and grapple you. Rules as written in 5th edition, you can't sub out the multi-attack attacks for a grab and a shove to knock them prone, and then just lock them under your boot. I do not like this. However, being able to grapple and manipulate people is impeding. In 5th edition, a grapple doesn't really deny you very much. However, it does mean that you're now in a situation you don't want to be in, as that giant will just walk away with you and people won't see you again. To pretty much sum up, as I've rambled a little bit too long and a little bit erratically, to make your giant fights a little bit more interesting, use more manipulating actions. Simply hitting someone twice with an axe is scary the first time you do it, and they do a lot of hit point damage, but hit point damage is the most basic thing you can do. It's lacking any long-term implications. With the 3rd edition Sunder, the fighter no longer has their main weapon. They're now relegated to using this longsword, or maybe a slightly different greatsword. Or maybe they have to start using axes, the horror. Imagine that. You're playing a dwarf and all of a sudden you have to start using bloody swords like some lanky human type. Having had your shield rendered means that you've now lost a little bit of AC, which, means that you now have to think about things and you have to sort of source another option. Maybe the giant happened to have a slightly inferior shield in its loot, so it's not like a complete, oops, sorry, I stole your nice toy. Overrun. Again, it causes things to move. You are now in a different place. They are now in a different state, and the other character is in a different threat space. Terrifying. DCC. One of the crits we went over was the fact that you lose D6 inches off your height. That does nothing mechanically, but your character is now a little bit shorter because you have this permanent battle scar from when you fought a giant. And this makes it more than just an encounter you have and then move on after a long rest and forget about it, because hit points come back. You have your sword, you're bored, your hit points, you get hit by a giant. Oh no, you beat the giant. Next morning, you have your sword, you're bored, your hit dice. It's forgotten. It just disappears, like tears in the rain. Whereas with these, you have now caused an absolute amount of fear, and plans now have to change going forward. Other options you could have is making this tie into something more specific. Perhaps you are off in the woods trying to find some werewolf lord that's causing some sort of nonsense, and there is a giant in these woods, and when he comes across you, he breaks your silver sword, and now you don't have a silver weapon to fight the werewolf, so you're going to have to come back and come up with a plan. You're now having to think and interact with that moment, rather than simply, yeah, he hit me 5 or 6 times, I nearly died, so I hit him 5 or 6 times, and then he died, and then I slept, and then we just carry on as if nothing happened. It's so boring. If you ever run a DCC giant style, where you, instead of doing double dice damage on a crit, instead you fling the person you hit into someone else and have them both take a bit of extra damage, that is beautiful. Like, if you want to do that super simply, you do your crit damage, you do the normal damage to the person you hit, then you take the doubled damage, the second set of damage that would make it doubled, half that, each person takes half. Job done. So you've crit this person, they now take full and a half, and this other person who was just completely minding their own business now takes a half. They're both prone. What does prone cost? It costs half your movement to stand up. It's not a very high cost. But for a brief moment, both these people are like, oh gosh, stuff's gone wrong. Wolves can trip people with an attack. It's not this difficult. So the next time I see you having a giant fight, I want to feel absolute terror in my knees. I want to see this thing throwing a rock through the darkened sky at night. You're sitting there doing your night watch. This thing hurtles a rock from further away than the light radius allows you to see. Everything suddenly goes black. You're showered in ash and embers. You don't know what's happening. Suddenly, the starlight filters in, you're able to see again, and by that point, it's almost too late. The giant is pushing aside trees, swinging its axe. Everyone's lost, confused, don't know what's going on. It's not there for your stuff, it's there for you. This giant is not there to exchange hit points with you for an hour of real time as you do all the numbers. It is there to steal your stuff. You are included in your stuff. If it has to kill one or two of you to make the others fall in line, it will do this. But the giant doesn't really care. The giant has a life, the giant has a goal, the giant has something it wants to achieve. And it will do that with your help or without you existing. Now, I did get a little bit carried away at the end there, but I did have a lot of fun doing this. I hope you did as well. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe, and let me know in the comments. If there's anything you'd like to see me do more, please do say in the comments, and I'll see what I can work in. This is all very new ground to me, and I'm having a lot of fun doing it already. Thank you very much for listening. Keep adventuring, trust the dice, and have fun. Ciao.